All right, welcome back to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Jerry Shoemaker from Enfield PD in North Carolina. He has 36 years in the public service profession. Welcome to the show, Chief Shoemaker. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate you
Of
over here in
course.
North Carolina.
I'm looking forward to it. I know that you have been in the public service profession for a really long time. You started at 19 years old in the military police. Give us a little bit of background into you and how you got started and what your career has looked like so far.
Well, thank you for having me. And I had a chance to look at some of your videos, First Jevity with Paige here, and I think what you're doing is dynamic. So I
Thank
want my hats off to you and applaud you for that. Uh, to a little bit about myself, in 1989, I always grew up when I grew up, I said to myself, what do I want to do? And I used to watch One Adam 12, as a kid, and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be there to help people. I want to be there to give people that hug and I want to make it better for those that are in need. And so that's at a very young age, 7 or 8 years old, I kind of aspired to be a law enforcement officer. So in 1989, when I graduated from high school, off to Fort McClellan I went. And I was a military police officer. I excelled in DUI detection, traffic related stuff. That was kind of my niche. That's where everyone in law enforcement kind of falls into what they like to do, and traffic was the thing that I love to do. So after spending 3.5 years or 2.5, 3 years as a military police officer, I received an honorable discharge from the military after Desert Storm, and I went to Pinkerton Security and Investigations in Syracuse, New York, where I would grow very quickly into the management side of things. And I was 21 years old as an operations manager for a $2.2 million a month contract and investigation and security company for all of New York State. So I had
you.
350 employees, and I was handling billing and payroll and learning very quickly how to relate to the public, dealing with selling contracts, dealing with various emotions, make sure that contracts are staffed, those kinds of things. And then once I moved from Syracuse to North Carolina as a single parent of my 4 and 5 year old son and daughter, I became a Mr. Mom. So I had to shift gears again. That wasn't part of my initial plan. I really wanted to stay in the military for a 20-year career, but some of the things that were happening amongst relationship that caused me to be a Mr. Mom, I thought, yeah, I better focus in on the Mr. Mom side first. So I did that. And when I moved to North Carolina, I went to Nash Community College. I attended there and received an associate's degree in criminal justice, where then I began to teach there for 7 years. So I taught continuing ed, things like build and repair computers, typing, Office, Microsoft Office series, those kinds of things. And I continued to just harp on education,
Mhm.
whether I'm teaching or learning, it's both. And then when while I met my wife that I'm married to now, 24 years, Debbie, and I said, I want to open up a business because I've always had an entrepreneur spirit. So I opened up a business, Deb's Funnel Cakes and Share Outreach Ministry. Both of those, which the one funneled money into the other. So the business funneled money into the ministry where I would serve people,
Mm.
always serving people. That was my heart, serving whether I'm a police officer, whether I'm a pastor, it doesn't matter. I'm moving forward for the goodness of those around me. And I really felt like that was my calling to really serve the people in the community. So excelling a little bit further, I did that. I opened that, and I've had Deb's Funnel Cakes and Share Outreach Ministry for well over 21 years.
Wow.
And I went back to school, got my bachelor's degree and master's degree in criminal justice with a focus on administration. And I decided, I'm 48 now. The kids are grown. My wife didn't want me to do it before the kids were grown because if something happened to me, then there would be a problem about where the kids would go and that kind of thing. And she said, you can do it now that the kids are grown. So once the kids got grown, I was 48 years old. I went back through the academy and decided, I'm going to go back into law enforcement again. I've been pastoring a church here in this town back in 2003, and then 2017. Who would have thunk that I would be doing law enforcement in this town? But it's always been my passion. Law enforcement has always been my heart's desire, but utilizing the ministry and law enforcement both as a platform to always serve people has been my go-to. So, and that's what brought me here. Now, I've served here and Halifax County Sheriff's Office, and I served here originally. Then I left and went and did criminal interdiction, drug interdiction on the interstate with Lieutenant Emerson Carroll. We had a team that we worked with, and then I left and came back, and then I went and worked at the sheriff's office again in the courthouse. And the current sheriff Tyree Davis said, hey, you're more of a help to me in Enfield than you are here, because he used to be the chief here in Enfield, so he knows what it's like to sit in this seat. And I said, okay. So I came back to Enfield as the captain to try and help rebuild this police department from zero officers. And I can
Wow.
report last Friday, we just became full. So I'm thankful for that. And here we are.
I love it. Thank you. There's so many things that I want to circle back to and dive into with what you just said. One of which is starting in this career at such a young age. When you say 19, I think about who I was at 19, and it's so vastly different than who I am now. And when I was 19, I didn't know anything about anything, and so to start in this career so young and have that be a part of your development, do you think that that shifted or impacted your perspectives on life and impacted your development through your, young early 20s, even to now?
Absolutely. I can tell you when I was a young 19-year-old with the kind of powers of the police,
Mm,
as an older person, when I say older, I'm talking about within 4 or 5 years by the time I was 25, I realized, wow, that's an awful big responsibility for a 19-year-old to
mm,
be able to seize someone's civil liberties, to be able to, make split-second judgments that could cost somebody their life or even save a life. Having that responsibility at 19 was tremendous, tremendous. And I've always said after I started walking through or going down the path of education that I don't know if I agree with starting out and being able to have that kind of authority at 19. I think education should be part of that. I think if I had it my way in this country, I would say, look, to be a law enforcement officer, you must graduate with a 2-year degree first. I think that education helps you have training and education. Of course, experience and exposure and background has a lot to do with it, but training and education play a big part on developing you to be an officer that society needs you to be,
yeah.
not necessarily what you are at the time. So
Yeah, I agree when you say that it's a huge responsibility. I think our perspectives and the way that we show up for ourselves and for the world is based on our preconditioning and the things that we go through in our lives, and when you're that young and you're exposed to the nature of your profession and the things that you see, and then on top of it, we have all of these other components that we talk about on this podcast of, and you have to be financially responsible, and, if you have a family, you got to show up for them. And it's just compiling all of these expectations on the shoulders of someone who's so young. And we're saying, hey, like, you got to be proactive. And I agree that all of those things are important. And I also agree that being proactive is important. But I also know what it's like to be 19 and to maybe be a little bit immature in the sense of not having a lot of life experience yet, not really thinking that you're ever going to get to our age. You know, you think you have so much time and then you blink and it's gone. And so I would imagine that, you know, all the young people who are starting this career, it does have an impact on your development and your perspectives. And I know that education was something that was important to you. And I want to kind of just like kind of do a checklist of what you said. So you started in the military police when you were 19, and then you left the career to raise your family as a single dad. Then you went back to college and you got your degree, your associate's degree, and then you got a master's degree, and then you were a professor and
Yes.
you were a pastor, which makes me feel like a huge underachiever as I'm like going down this checklist. Do you think that education is a part of wellness?
Absolutely. You know, I had a personal goal that I set, and it kind of, I don't even know how it happened, just did. I decided, I need something. I got to grab a hold of something. So education seemed like the thing. But I can honestly say when I was in high school, I excelled at D's and C's and F's. I mean, I didn't do very well at all. And it's because of peer pressure, bullying, and those kinds of things. This is where my root I think this is where my background plays a big part. I came from a very well-to-do town called Casanova, New York. A very small town, very well-to-do place, and there was a lot of peers there that grew up where they would drive the 911 Porsche. They would wipe off the snow in the morning and off the 911 Porsche and drive it around the corner just to go into the school building. And I was like,
Mm,
really? I mean, you could have walked faster and you did all that, but there was this whole persona about, hey, we're up here and you're down there. And so I didn't do very well because I didn't particularly like bullies. I didn't like it. I didn't like anything to do with it. And I thought, I don't want anything to do with this type of behavior. So that's where the background of all that came from. And so I think so I had a personal goal when I started my I want to say educational career because a lot of people say, "What are you, you're a career student or whatever?" Yeah, I'm always wanting to learn. Yes, I'm never going to stop learning because to me, learning is just the key to everything. Research, reading, it's just everything, and it helps mold and shape who you are today, especially me. But and I wasn't one. I had a mission. I said, "Look, I want to get my associates, bachelor's, master's, and now I'm." Considering and actually teetering on the going back to get my doctorate.
wow.
I'm really leaning towards and setting that up. It's probably going to happen. I want to study emotional intelligence, leadership, and those kinds of things so I can contribute to society by what I write.
Mm,
That's what I want to do. Now, my personal goal, and this is the caveat, this is where I really want people to listen. Young people need to listen because old people know some things, right? We've been through some things. Uh, I said, you know what? I'm going to get a 4.0 straight A in every single class in my associate's, bachelor's, and master's degree. And I did it. 4.0, all three degrees. It wasn't because I was super intelligent. It was because I wanted it and I worked hard.
mm,
That's it. That's it. I studied, worked hard. And it was very difficult to do, but and if I can do it, anybody can. And that education, to answer your question, plays a huge part on where you're going, what your calling may be on your life, what gifts maybe that you have, because I actually believe there's two parts. One is the gifts that's put in you, and the other is the things you love to do, right? When they
mm.
fit together, you can explode with happiness and explode with everything that is around you that society or yourself needs so you can impart to other people. And so education has played a huge role in where I am today.
Yeah. You know, before you even said you worked hard, I wrote down work ethic. And my experience with this, I always knew that maybe I wasn't going to be the most talented. Maybe I didn't know the most, but what I did know, and this was something that was really important to me as I was coming up in my life and in my career, was that I was willing to outwork everybody. And that work ethic, when you put your mind to something, like you said, you want it. And I had someone say recently, and I agreed with this. They said, your attention and your time will go towards the things that matter the most to you, right? It's your
Absolutely.
priorities. And so if this is a priority for you and it's something that's important to you, you're going to make the time for it. And when I had those moments of like, you know what? I want to be the best. I want to achieve XYZ and I'm going to put in the work because, like you said, everyone can do it. You just have to work really hard and you have to be willing to make those sacrifices sometimes for that to happen. And a lot of times people don't want to put in that work and effort. And maybe it's because their goals or their priorities aren't in that place yet. But for me, I was like, I'm going to outwork everyone. I'm going to work really, really hard. And even if I'm not the best at something, no one can say that I didn't work really hard. And through that process, I built a lot of confidence. And when you have confidence in yourself to say, hey, I can achieve these things, I can achieve anything if I put my mind to it, it does give you this sense of achievement, a sense of happiness in a way, and I think that that's something that everyone should strive for at some point in their life is to find something that really matters to you and that you're willing to put in the work and effort to achieve something that is hard and something that's out of your comfort zone. And I want to talk about resilience with you a little bit in a little bit, but I think that when you learn to do hard things, the more hard things you do, the more hard things you can do. And
Yep.
then you have this confidence where you're like, oh, like that's hard, but I know I can do it. Why do I know I can do it? Because I've done hard things before. So it's this practice of like continuing to kind of push that a little bit and say, you know what? Like I'm sure your master's was harder than your associates. And the next degree you're going to get is harder than your master's, but you can do it because you've done hard things before.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. But it is, and I've learned along, it's kind of funny because I would never consider myself a good writer. And after becoming, and here's another little tidbit that you kind of think about after you become educated, so to speak. Um, I find myself writing along and I'm like, nope, that's not right. That's not a professional way to write. You need to fix that. You catch yourself more, and that's that education kicking in. So a lot of people, there's a lot of people in my career, especially because, and I'm speaking, when I say this, I'm speaking to folks that are in law enforcement. They know that sometimes you get a degree, it doesn't really mean a lot as far as promotions and those kinds of things. Unfortunately, it doesn't weigh a whole lot. But I want to encourage people because it may not weigh a lot on the surface, but it weighs a lot in your actions, what you do, how you speak, how you act, your preparedness, where you're going to go. And you're in control. You're in the driver's seat of that. You navigate that. There's nothing that can stop you. You can reach for the moon. You can do anything. Because if I know if I can do it and I can achieve a 4.0 in every step of the way. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to do that in the doctorate degree. I want to give myself a little breathing room this time, but
Yeah.
you're exactly right. And I do think even touching back to what you said, being 19 and being a law enforcement officer, I think background plays a huge part in that. I had a job since I was 12 years old and riding my bike 30 miles a day to go milk cows on a farm and that kind of thing and paying bills and learning things at a young age. So that's where I thought, if I had it my way, I would make sure that people have at least a 2-year degree, even more so than that, being an old soldier. And you talk about resiliency and the outcomes of such. I actually believe that if this country made lottie-dottie everybody go do 2 years mandatory military when you graduate from high school, we would A, have a stronger military. We would have maybe a more mature group of young people, And then there'd be a caveat though. The government would have to there would be a trade-off there. The government would have to pay for your college. So there would be no debt for college. You serve in the military for 2 years, and then you go to and pursue what kind of education you want. Now, there are some people out there, the naysayers, that'll say, "What has your education done for you?" You know, and my son, up until I became the chief of police, used to pick on me and say, you got a education in criminal justice. What's it doing for you?" Because at the time I was the transportation manager or assistant transportation manager at McLean, doing business and then owning my own business. But he now sees, okay, just be a little patient. Education is truly the winner of everything.
Yeah. Well, I think I get on board with this idea of being a lifelong learner no matter what, regardless if you are continuing your education in a more structured way, or if you are listening to podcasts or reading books or listening to other people's perspectives on
Yes.
things and trying to understand where they're coming from and then maybe like looking things up, like we have so much technology now that makes it so much easier to ask those questions and to learn so much more. And I think the moment that we stop learning is the moment that we find stagnation, right? And so we
Mhm.
want to always be a lifelong learner. And I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask you, but I think you already answered it, was, do you think that all of those things that you did, all of those life experiences of raising a family as a single dad, of going back to college, of being a pastor, of owning a business, of, being in management, if all of those skills that you learned have helped you now as a leader? And it sounds to me that the answer to that is absolutely yes. And I think sometimes we think that we have to do specified training for a very specific thing that we're trying to do. And I think that is also important, that you are an expert in the things that you're trying to do and you have that, specific type of learning and training. But to your point of what you said earlier, maybe some of the things that you learned in your life as, a single dad, you wouldn't think that that would apply to leadership, but it does. It teaches you patience and perseverance and resiliency. Or maybe in your master's degree, there were some things that you learned that aren't specific to law enforcement, but it taught you, um, work ethic. It taught you emotional intelligence, like you were saying before. Maybe it taught you critical thinking in a different way. And so I think that it's important that we expand our circle a little bit more. And I'm guilty of this too, where I'm like, I gotta learn about this, wellness thing. And I think sometimes if we just zoom out a little bit and we're willing to learn in different areas that don't feel like they relate, and then we realize later that they really, really do.
Yes, you're exactly right. I'll tell you, wellness is, like I said earlier, it's kind of on the chopping block because of the leadership training I just went to, but it provoked something in me. I was busy over the last several months since being promoted to the chief from the captain's position in February, kind of focusing on getting us to the place where we are now, where we're full. We don't have any openings. Now there's a shift that's taken place where I'm now focusing, okay, now that we're full, how do we retain officers? But
Mm,
isn't just retaining, how do we develop a police department that not only operates with transparency, but officers are engaging in community-oriented policing? Because it's important. Community-oriented policing, and that kind of touches on the bullying with the badge, bullies with badges and that kind of thing. And it's quite funny because I was actually tested yesterday on resilience and patience and those kinds of things when I had to make a decision publicly, and I was actually attacked publicly.
mm,
My character was attacked publicly, and somebody actually said that, and I'm not going to say anything, any details, but somebody said that, maybe I was weaponizing my badge. And I happen to know that on the contrary, if somebody knows me like I know me, and a lot of other people know me, they know that I'm completely the opposite of that. I
Yeah.
believe that the badge is our symbol and our promise to society that we will be there to protect them. When they need us, we're there to hug babies, kiss babies, hug necks, get down on the floor, bark like a dog, whatever I got to do as long as we get up and everybody's whole. And the last thing that I do is usurp authority, use the badge as a weapon, or go against people being a bully with a badge. I've got 40 years of really, really focusing and honing in on what can I do to not become that type of person. And one of the things and I don't know if I didn't, this is something I want to kind of throw out there. I've had a one question survey for over 15 years, and it is a closed-ended question. That's it. And I would ask law enforcement professionals, criminal justice people, people that are educated in criminal justice, this one closed-ended question. And it is simply put, do you know who Sir Robert Peel is? Yes or no?
Mm.
I have gotten over 1,000 no's and two yeses in over 15 years. That's a problem because Sir Robert Peel was the founder of modern day policing in 1829, and he wrote the nine Peelian principles that if we lived by today, we would not have this bullies with badges and a divide, us against them mentality, and we would connect with the community in ways that we need to, especially after George Floyd and the civil unrest and COVID and 2020 and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I do want to talk a little bit about that because I know when you and I talked offline, the importance of communication and engaging with the community. But then we also talked a little bit about being able to communicate internally, effectively. And I know that you've mentioned this a few times in the podcast about not being a bully in the community, but then how can you also show up for your team in a way that is open and receptive and non-judgmental? And so,
True.
can you talk a little bit about verbal judo,
Yeah.
communication, and the importance of that?
Well, the late Dr. Thompson came up with this theory, verbal judo here. In fact, the former chief of police here, he had the luxury of going, and I wish I did, but I didn't. He had the luxury of sitting in under him before he passed away and becoming an instructor for verbal judo. I learned about it in college when I was working on my bachelor's degree. And basically, when the nutshell is when they're going up here, them, meaning whoever you're speaking to, is elevating. You're not matching them at their energy. You're staying here. And you bring the whole thing down by throwing out triggering questions, those kinds of things that gets them thinking about something other than what they're doing. And they're in their emotions. So you need to get them out of their emotions into reality. And I'm very good at it. I actually love doing this because when I go out there and someone could be off to the side, bah, 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 bah. Their whole world is just falling apart. And I'll say, have you ever shot a mosquito? And they'll look at me, and they're just like, what? It completely just throws them off. Or, why do we chew Jello? Or I'll just say something off the wall that gets them back over here. And I use that on purpose. But I also, though we wear rank on our shoulder and all this stuff and awards and all, the public doesn't care about that. When
Mm.
I stop somebody, I say, hey, how you doing? I'm Jerry. How's your day going? Why are you speeding so fast? Man, come on. Not give me your license. I'm Chief so and so. You know what I mean? I think it's important how you speak to people, how you utilize communication the right way so that you can de-escalate. Now, I've had some complaints about me in the past because they say the guy was yelling at me, but I have to go back sometimes and apologize and say, listen, I'm a little deaf because of being in the military and shooting. I've got hearing loss, and I didn't have my hearing aids in today. So I kind of, and the chief of police here used to say, use your inside voice. So
Mm.
Tyree Davis always says it all the time. He's the sheriff now, Sheriff Davis. use your inside voice. And when you pray over the meal, make sure we hear it, not the people on the other side of the restaurant,
Mm,
that kind of thing. But it goes back to communication. What you say, how you say it, your delivery, your body language, everything you do and say. Now, don't get me wrong, as police officers, sometimes we have to be stern. We
mm,
have to have a direct command center or a stance, a use of force. This uniform, even getting out of the car, is already in the continuum of use of force. It already tells them, hey, we better pay attention, that kind of thing. But I think de-escalation, use of verbal judo, and understanding how body language is. Number one, you've got to know all this and what you're looking at anyway, because it'll keep you safe so that you can go home at night,
mm,
because the guy that wants to be in a traffic stop that thinks in their mind that they don't want to go back to prison, they're going to kill you, they're going to do that. So you need to be prepared. This profession, being a law enforcement officer, and I think what you're doing is so cool because you're exactly right. We need to sometimes look at each other, patch to patch, and find out where we're at so
mm,
that we can go out there and do the job. Because there is I'm telling you, there is it's tough. It really is. You've got to be a cut above the rest. You've got to know, and here again, that's where training, education, exposure, background, being in the right police department, being around leaders that can steer you down the right way and be able to monitor what you're doing and say, look, hey, constructive criticism. I'm a leader now,
mm,
and all of that education is absolutely helping me be the best chief of police I can be. Because I told my captain, I said, let me tell you something. My job is not to be intimidated by you. I want you to take my job.
mm.
My job is to get you from where you're at and minister to where you need to go. And along the way, and you need to be able to continue, even as a leader, internally, you have to know how to speak to people. You have to know how to manage because 87% of people quit their job because they hate their boss.
Yeah,
So you have to know how to do that, navigate in that space.
yeah. Have you ever heard of pattern disruptors?
Yes.
So when you were talking about, when someone's up here
Hmm.
and they're, maybe have lost that like control, that
Hmm.
emotional control, and you say, "Have you ever shot a mosquito?" You said it a lot better with your Southern accent, you know.
But I'm from New York. Oh
I
my
can't do
God.
it. I know. But it's a pattern disruptor,
Yes.
right? It's getting them out of that like pattern that they're in right now and having them take that step back and be like, whoa, wait. And it's actually really, really effective. And I've talked about pattern disruptors on this podcast before in different contexts, but that's exactly what that is, right? It's like catching them off guard for a second to be like, wait, hold on. And now you've stopped that pattern of that like emotional reactiveness or whatever it is that they're doing. One of the things that I find to be really interesting, and I do think this is on a similar topic to what we were just talking about, but we talk about treat people like you would want your family to be treated, right? And in the context of, how you guys are showing up in the community, but then how you guys are also showing up for each other as a team, making sure that there's that support and that respect. And what I have seen a lot of, and I haven't been in this space for as long as you have, but I've been in this space for 8 years, and I see a lot of this conversation around like, you know, we're a family. It's okay if something bothers you. It's okay to talk about things. It's okay to be vulnerable, and to reach for resources and all of these things. There's a lot of conversation about that. But then I've also been in the rooms where people are doing that and they are sharing or being vulnerable or talking about an experience, or maybe they do need support in one way or another. And I see and I hear the judgment that comes
Oh,
from that. And so I think it's a reminder too that, like, you know, you want to show up for your community. You want to show up for yourself. Most importantly, really, you have to take care of yourself first if you're going to take care of anybody else. But also, like, how are we showing up for the people in our lives? Whether that's professionally or personally. And is there a judgment or a peer pressure that's happening? Because that's what I see. I see, and maybe it's not everywhere, but I see that people are afraid to communicate because they're afraid of the judgment that's not just going to happen from leadership, but that's going to happen from peer to peer. And so I do think that one, it's important to be an effective communicator, but I also think it's important to have that self assessment and to be an effective listener and not just jump to a conclusion or jump to a judgment. And one of the things that we talked about a little bit, because you talked about earlier, maintaining control, having those like moments of like maybe someone is, yelling at you, or maybe someone is coming at you in a negative way. And you have to have the training and the ability to not respond to that in a negative way or not react to that immediately. And my question is, how do you train people to have that ability to be tough, to not have emotions, to not react to these things, but then also to not harden over time and to still have humanity and still be a human underneath of it all?
Well, that's a good question. And like I said, it happened yesterday to me. And I actually, when I was accused of weaponizing my badge, I immediately thought, how dare you say that?
Mm,
You're questioning my integrity, my love for what I've done. You know nothing about me. And but I quickly said, but in leaning on what you just asked, how do you do that? How do you maintain that posture? And I think it comes from education and experience. I actually do because I'm surrounded by younger people that probably would not have shown the same um, I want to say, what do you call it? Not, not maybe discipline.
mm, mhm,
Maybe it's a discipline thing. Yeah, because my flesh, when I say my flesh, wanted to get all in the flesh, and then I decided, you know what? This is not the time or the space. I need to hold this because there is such thing as a fitly spoken word, and this is not the time or the space. So I held back, and I do believe that your background and years in service do play that part. And that even lends itself to belief that, hey, to be in a position like this where you're met with those crossroads in order to handle it, that's exactly why you don't promote somebody prematurely. You
mm,
don't put somebody in a position of, let's say, the chief of police because they may not be able to handle those types of things at that moment. And those types of experiences come through training, experience, age, wisdom, these kinds of things that you don't receive overnight. And how do you know how to handle some things unless you've gone through some things? So in
yeah.
other words, that's not my first rodeo when it comes to certain things like that. Now, speaking to wellness, because it is a doggy dog, backbiting, sometimes nasty place to be dealing with patch to patch amongst your peers this way is internally. Um, and one of the things that I do, I encourage open door policies. I go to my office, I call each officer, and I make it personal. I show the human side. Hey, it's not just Chief Shoemaker, Chief this, Chief that. Sometimes it's just Shoe. Sh-
Mm.
I shorten my name up to Shoe. Everybody calls me Shoe. In the community, they call me, hey, what's up, Shoe? I call the people, my officers, and I call them and I say, look, how are you today? Did you have a good shift? Or I'll bring something into the PD and throw it on the grill and make sure the officers coming in at night will have dinner, or if they miss dinner, there'll be something there for them to eat. And they're like, wow, I've never had another chief do that. In fact, one of my flyers, and I'll throw this in here, but I'm not going to forget to finish the other part of that answer. Every flyer, when you're a police officer, you always put together your flyer and you stick it up on the bulletin board, and hey, we're hiring here and this is what we offer, and take home cars and there's our salary and all this. When I developed my flyer, I put free popcorn. Free popcorn. And they're like,
Pattern
what?
disruptor.
Yes. And I did that on purpose. Free popcorn. Because every officer goes up to the bulletin board and they stare at the bulletin board and they take a business card and they do this and that and blah, 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 and they throw it away. I know because I've been there, done it. I said, how do I do this where I'm not going to get forgotten in the pile? I'm going to put on there free popcorn. And now it's the talk everywhere I go. A year or two later, are you the place that gives away free popcorn? Absolutely. And they're like, wow, what made you do that? And we literally do. I take it out of my pocket and I buy I've got it figured out. 250 pounds of popcorn we go through a year, and it's about anywhere from $400 to $500 I put into popcorn, and I cook it every day. Now, where did that come from? Deb's funnel cakes. I already had all these machines, and we've got funnel cake, and cotton candy machines and blow ups and all this. I use that for outreach purposes. But the popcorn machine, we cook it every day. Because I tell people, what is there not to love about popcorn?
Yeah,
We can have a conversation over popcorn. Get you a bag of popcorn. And we can squash up the bag when we're done and throw it in out. We're going to have popcorn. And
yeah,
so I do things like this because I want people to think, okay, you're a little different. And officers have come here and said, you actually listen to what we're saying. When we come to you with a problem, you're actually listening, because then I see you doing something to help with that problem. And where can we find a solution? If I don't know, I'm going to find out. But I show them a level of love, because if you listen to me, you love me. Period. I don't care where we are. And what's there not to love about popcorn? And what's there not to love about love? And feeling like somebody cares about what's going on in your life. Or maybe it's just for that moment. Maybe you're having a bad day, or maybe you're having a rough week, or you had something happen. The hot water blew up at the house. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm going to give you that space because that is what I'm here to do. And I'm not going to be like, well, did you talk to the captain first? It all has to do with along with how you communicate and how important that communication is to the listener
yeah.
as well as the talker.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I think that everyone does want to feel valued. And I think there's no one, I will argue with someone all day long if they walk up to me and they say, I don't want to feel valued by
Oh,
anyone. Everyone wants to feel valued, you know? From a young kid, you want to feel loved and valued and supported. One of the things that you said that I wrote down, and you kind of said this too, because it's so true that sometimes you learn from things that you didn't do very well.
hmm
And so when you're like, I've been around the block, this is not my first time. I was thinking that in my own life because one of the things that popped up for me is, you saying, I'm going to, in this moment of heightened emotion, I have the ability to take a pause and say, I'm not going to respond to this in the way that maybe I want to, because I know it's not really the best way to respond right now. That is, we call it a tactical pause. I always make the joke, you put tactical in front of it and it just is cool, but that is emotional regulation. That is wellness. And that is learned over time because how many of us who are, listening to this have not done that? Like, how many times did it take us to respond in a negative way for us to learn how to like actually take that pause? For me, like it has been my whole life. I was extremely emotionally reactive. If anyone ever was confrontational with me, I was pretty nasty, believe it or not, because I know I'm like perfect now, right? But I was really nasty. I was really emotionally reactive. That is how I learned how to survive at a young age with the things that I went through when I was a kid, in my environment that I grew up in. And so that was how I survived. If someone came up to me and was confrontational, immediate to respond. It was always nasty, it was always negative. I didn't have that emotional control that I have now learned, through years and years of trying to learn it, but also years and years of doing it wrong and not doing it the best, and I think that you have to give yourself grace sometimes when you don't do things right, because there are still times where I feel like I revert back a little bit, where someone says something, and instead of taking that breath and taking that pause, I say something. Usually it's in like a personal relationship setting where I say something and then I immediately regret it. And I'm like, oh no, now I have to take more time and energy to apologize and try to right the wrong and all the things. But I do think you learn over time and experience. And I think the goal is to always try to be better and try to improve yourself over time. I also like that you talked about really trying to come from a space of love. I've never heard it before where you said, if you're listening to someone, it's because you love them, or if they're listening to you, it's because they love you. That's a really interesting perspective, that I've never heard before. And then back to the popcorn pattern disruptor. People are like, "What? What is that?" And so I think that's really cool. My question for you, and I know we're kind of butting up on time here, but what do you think resilience truly is? When you tell me your story of everything that you went through and then coming back into law enforcement at 48 years old, I believe you said it was 48 years old, and now chief of police and trying to make a difference and still trying to improve yourself and trying to improve the agency and the men and women that serve with you. What do you think the definition of resilience is?
I would say it's like hanging onto a plow and not looking back. And if you think for a second about a person, now this is hot off the press right here. If you think about a person that's running a marathon and they have that baton in their hand, and they run it just, and then they hand it back like this, but they don't look behind them
Mm,
because they may fall. They reach back as far as they can while they're running. And I think resilience has a lot to do with that. Like you're just focused on the forward movement. It's almost like you're playing football and you're at the line and you're bumping people and everybody's trying to get you off your path and you're just pushing towards the goal. And that's why I think it's important to set goals,
mhm,
smart goals, and set those goals and then constantly reevaluate where you're at with those goals because there's always going to be things that try to beset you, that knock you off your path. And part of resilience is refusing, absolutely refusing to give up on yourself, to give up on what your focus is, and understanding who you are and what you want to accomplish. Like, why am I here? What is my purpose? Why am I here? I didn't ask to be here. I'm here. What is the purpose for me? And that's why I love this analogy. You take the purpose that God has for you in your life. I told the church one time, spread your fingers. Everybody loves it. I love hands. God's purpose for you, mix it with the things you love to do. When they come together, you'll explode with happiness.
mm,
Why? Because if you find a job you love to do, you never work a day of your life,
yeah.
ever. And resilience is refusing to give up. It's refusing to give in. It's refusing to take no for an answer. It's refusing to listen to the naysayers. I've had plenty of naysayers from 19 to now, and I still have them now that even, oh, wasn't that just Shoemaker? Why is he the chief of police? I've got people that attacks come from all angles. The bigger levels you go, the bigger the attacks are. But it doesn't matter. As long as you are solid in who you are
Mm,
and you don't let anybody else get in these two ear gates because whatever goes in here goes in your heart, comes out here.
Mm.
Whatever goes in here goes in your heart, comes out your mouth. And so you got to guard these ear gates. So if something comes along and tries to get in there and that doesn't line up with your plan, you shoot it down. It's out of here. I'm not taking that in. That's not me. I don't receive that. And if you stay with that and don't allow these naysayers I call them little foxes also in the troubles of the day. It isn't just people that say things. It could be actions. It could be things you dealt with that day, the pressures, the emotions of that day. Well, of course, we always have to unwind. And that's why here I'm going to be looking, now that we're full, I'm going to be focused. I told you there's a shift. I'm going to be focusing on a wellness room.
Mm.
And in that wellness room, I already see it before it's here. I want it to have a massage chair in there. I don't want it to have a black light or a blue light because that messes with your mind a little bit. I learned in the leadership. I want it to be something where it maybe have soft music, where an officer maybe 10 minutes to go in the wellness room
Yeah.
and unwind. They
Yeah.
need it because it's important. And so resilience to me is never giving up, staying focused, not allowing, understanding who you are and not taking in what anybody says and actually living true to yourself and being who God called you to be.
Yeah.
And reaching that goal and keeping your eyes on that goal at all times, no
Um,
matter what comes.
I really love that definition. I loved that analogy of like the runner. I also love the analogy of the football. I think that everyone who's listening can see that, you know. And gosh, like for me, it's so much harder in practice. Like for me personally, and everything that you're saying about, don't let the naysayers and don't let other people like influence you or like, knock you off track. And I am such a sensitive person. I really am very, and I think that again, this comes from, I think our, how we are is based on, our life experiences. And I think that this probably has a lot to do with my childhood stuff, but, kind of that self-worth, and when there are the naysayers, it's like, oh, like I'm not good enough or, oh, I'm less than. And I think that to your point, it comes with that experience of um, not giving up. And, you start to realize what words are worth listening to and who's in your corner. And what I've learned in my life is don't listen to people who don't want you to win, people who aren't in your corner. Like you should choose your circle so carefully. They say that like the five people who are around you, like the five closest people are the most important. They're the most influential people in your life. And so pick them carefully. And I used to want everybody to like me, to love me, to support me. And I realize now as I get older that that's never, ever, ever going to happen. Ever. You could be a saint and people are still not going to support you for whatever reason, and it has nothing to do with you. It's not your business, it's their business, right? And so what I learned is as you start to grow too, they always say that you know who your friends are in your hardest times. And I do think that that's true in certain ways, but I also think that you learn who your friends are when you are excelling in things and when
Absolutely.
you are achieving things and you start to see who is still there cheering you on the sidelines and they're so excited for you to win.
Yep.
They're in your corner. They want you to be the best version of yourself personally, professionally, and no matter how many awards or achievements or whatever it is that you have going on in your life, they're still there cheering you on. And then you start to see the people who are trying to tear you down while you're rising up. And so I love the concept of don't give up on yourself. Keep going. And I agree with you. I think don't listen to people who don't have any weight in your life and people who want to drag you down because no matter how hard you try to make everybody happy, it's never going to happen. And as
Yeah.
long as you know that you're doing the right things and you know that your heart's in the right place, that's all that matters. So thank you for that definition. And I know it's so much harder. Like, and I also think that if you are that runner, or that football player and you face plant it, that's okay too.
Yep.
As long as you get up and you
As
get
long as
back
you
in
get
the
up.
game, get back in the game, right?
Uh-huh.
My final question for you is for the younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? You've already shared so many, but maybe in the context of wellness, maybe something that you wish you would have known or something that's helped you along the way.
I wish I would have known or even thought about the importance of decompressing at a young age and not holding in because like I said that where I came up in law enforcement in the beginning, if you saw something and it played on your emotions, which we're human, I wish I would have known it was okay. It was okay to display those emotions.
Mhm.
Um, it's interesting because in the beginning you're told to suck it up. You need to be tough. Don't worry about it. If you get hurt, oh, just put a Band-Aid on it. But what about your emotions? What about your thoughts? Your your what are you doing to decompress or keep yourself in a safe space so that you're not going down the road of depression that leads to suicides and those kinds of things or PTSD? It's real. I now realize that after 30 some years, some of the things that even I've seen, I'm not afraid to say it. I speak to counselors about now, and I do and I'm proud of that. But 30 years ago, I couldn't say that. You don't dare tell anybody you're talking to somebody that may help you deal with some of the things you've seen in your past and those kinds of that's a no-no. You can't do that. I would tell young people, yes, you can. You can be human. The other day, I ran into a situation where I was literally feeling like I was having a breakdown. And that was okay because my integrity was challenged because I was actually typing on the phone and my phone does this to me all the time. My phone is not my friend. It changes my words. If you don't reread what you're getting ready to send, sometimes you're like, whoa, I didn't mean to send that. And I literally had to leave the space I was in to come into town and deal with that immediately because I didn't want to let any space grow in between. Because if you can't trust me, I am no good to you. Trust, integrity is everything to me. Everything. Without it, I am no good to the community. I'm no good to anybody. I don't need anybody thinking a certain way because of a text that didn't come across right. So I think that honesty and integrity is very important. So tell young people need to know that. Look, if you mess up, we all make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to face plant, as you said. And by the way, that's a good analogy, and I like the way you put that because when you said that, I immediately thought of the many times, hundreds of times, if not thousands, that I have face planted and made a mistake. But here's the kicker. Be honest, face what you did, come forward with the truth in everything, and deal with the consequences because the truth will always prevail. Don't ever try to fix it any other way. Hey, I made a mistake. We're human. We are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. But that's all part of understanding who you are. You're not perfect. But face planning is something I've done quite a bit.
Same. Same.
A
Thank
lot of face planning.
100%. Well, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for coming on here and talking to me today. And I wish you all the best things with your new wellness room and everything that you're doing organizationally and in your life. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, and I think what you're doing is great. I've got something new to watch now and learn from. So, and I look forward to even reaching out to you and emailing you and staying connected because I think what you're doing is awesome. And I feel it from my heart that there's some way, I don't know yet, but somehow, some way, I feel like I will be able to sow into what you're doing, whether it be talking to other people or financially or whatever. I just think I feel led to tell you that. I don't know why,
You.
but I just feel led to tell you that. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
All right.